It's been 3 years since our divorce was finalized. Beth and I were married for nearly 18 years before our breakup. We were high school sweethearts and married shortly after graduation. At the time, we had no other lovers but each other. There's something to be said about that. It really is a good thing. Love outweighs just sex any day of the week. Of course, you don't really realize this until it's too late. We led, I guess, what you might call a good life. We had 4 kids together: Amy, Brad, Carla, and Daryl. We called them the alphabet kids. After Daryl was born, I had a vasectomy. I didn't want the whole alphabet. Amy and Brad are in college now, but Carla and Daryl still live with Beth, my ex-wife. What happened? What went wrong? We seemed to be a happy family. We were good parents and supported everything our kids did. We were like most young couples, struggling to make ends meet. I worked in a manufacturing plant, and Beth started working at the local Walmart store once the 2 older kids started school. The younger kids went to daycare when one of us wasn't home to watch them. It wasn't ideal, but in today's society, that's how it goes. I often wonder how my parents and grandparents were able to do it with the women not working. I don't know whether to blame society or materialism. We wanted a lot of things, and we wanted them too fast. Our love life started off great, like probably most young people. We did it all the time, day or night. As the kids were born, we did it less and less. It's probably that way with most families. We just didn't have the time, or so we thought. Looking back, the problem was us. We started taking each other for granted. Our love life became a hurry up and do it. We reached our climaxes, but it was nothing like the days of old. The sweat, and I love you so much type of sex. In a sense, it became boring, but only because we didn't put the love into it where it belonged. I eventually got a promotion to supervisor. Our financial situation became much better. As the kids grew older, we were able to go out once in a while. Dinner and a movie were enjoyable, and started to put a little of the luster back into our somewhat boring relationship. I guess all marriages go through it. You love each other, but take each other for granted. Beth came home one day and said she wanted to go out with the other girls at work. I didn't see any problem with that since our kids were now old enough to take care of themselves. This happened about 4 years ago. Beth got dressed in slacks and a blouse. She looked nice. She was like a lot of women, always worried about her weight. But she always seemed to look nice at any weight. When she got home, I asked her if she had a nice time. She told me she did and talked about some of the other girls. I have nothing against Walmart, but a lot of the women who worked there were divorced and separated. It didn't seem like the type of people Beth should be partying with. I told her so, and she got mad at me for downgrading her friends. I did no such thing. I told her it's just that these women will look for men, and she'll be there with them. She looked at me a little sheepishly. We were together for 18 years. I knew all her moods. Well, did you dance with any men? I asked. She delayed answering but then said, I didn't do anything wrong. Yes, I danced with a couple of guys, and that was all. I knew a little more had happened, but didn't push the issue right then. She told me that she and her friends were going to go out once a month. I wasn't really happy about it, but what could I really say? I would just have to wait and see. The following month, she wore a skirt with pantyhose. I watched her get dressed. She didn't say much to me. I told her that I would be waiting up for her. It was past midnight when she came in. She looked at me and started to go to the room to change. As she started toward the bedroom, I asked her, When you left, you had pantyhose on. Where are they? It was hot, and I took them off, was all she said. Beth, this is starting to get out of hand. We need to talk, I said. She asked me to leave the room so she could undress. I told her that she had undressed in front of me for 18 years and wanted to know what was so special about that night. I walked up to her and grabbed her by the arm, something I had never done. Please don't, Jerry. I beg you, please don't, she said, knowing what I was about to do. As I reached under her skirt and found her panties, she started crying as I pushed her away. "Well, I guess that answers why no pantyhose, doesn't it?" I remarked. "I'm sorry, Jerry. It just happened. I was drinking at this party, and Joe kept telling me how beautiful I was. Then he kissed me and began touching me. I've never been with anyone but you, Jerry. The girls kept telling me how good Joe is, and I let it happen. No one man came that much in you. You had more than one man, didn't you?" I asked. "When Joe took me, I was lying on the bed, and a couple of other guys came in and took advantage of me also," she admitted. "They didn't take you. You let them all screw you. Doesn't our marriage mean anything to you? Didn't you at least think about me or the kids?" "Jerry, I'm sorry. It wasn't love like you and I have. It was raw sex, and I liked it. Barb, one of the other girls, is married, and she told me she and her husband are into swapping. I don't want to lose you, Jerry. Please come with me one time and try it," she begged. I needed to think. My mind was going in 100 different directions. I told her I didn't want to talk anymore right then. My mind didn't comprehend what just happened. I told her we could talk the next day. I'd sleep on the couch that night. In the morning, after the kids left, I got dressed and went to work. Beth was still sleeping from her hard night. I couldn't keep my mind on my job, and took the afternoon off. I went to where Beth was working and walked up to her. She smiled at me. She was a cashier that day, and at the next register was her friend Barb. I had read the name on her name tag. "Honey, how come you're not at work?" she asked. Her friend Barb kept eyeing me. "I'm going to see Jeff, our lawyer, today. I'm getting a divorce," I said. I turned around and walked out. Behind me, I heard Beth yelling at me to wait. She had a customer at the register and wasn't sure what to do. I guess she was in panic mode. I didn't wait. I walked briskly out the door, got in my truck, and left. I went straight to the house and packed most of my clothing. I threw it all into boxes and put them in the truck. I had no idea where I was going, but I knew where I didn't want to be. I left a note for my kids. I told them that their mother and I were getting a divorce, and she could explain it to them. I really would like to know how she was going to explain this one. Probably make it my fault. She was good at blaming me for most things. I ended up going to my parents' house. They were in their 60s and had been married over 40 years. I told them that Beth and I were separating and would probably get divorced. I knew it hurt them because they really liked Beth, and this was probably a shock. I told them I needed a place to stay, and they offered me the whole basement. It was all remodeled and had a nice bedroom, even a small kitchenette and living room set up down there. They told me I could stay as long as I needed. They didn't use the basement much anymore. They didn't like the stairs. About 2 years ago, they moved the washer and dryer upstairs after Mom's hip replacement. I might ramble on a little while telling you this story. There's so much to tell. I know you want to know about Beth, what the kids thought, and input from the lawyer and a few other people. I told Mom and Dad that Beth wanted more freedom. It was kind of hard to explain that she wanted to have sex with other people. I didn't want to tell my parents that. I just told them that we felt differently about a number of things and didn't think we could come to an agreement. They weren't happy with that explanation, but it was all I could tell them for now. I did make it over to Jeff, our lawyer, and he told me that Beth had already called twice. I asked him if he was going to represent me or her. "She doesn't want a divorce, Jerry. She thinks you can work this out," Jeff said. "Answer my question, Jeff. Are you her lawyer or mine?" I asked again. "I'm hers, Jerry. She called me first, and I accepted the case. I'm sorry. If you would have called me, I would have been yours. Please talk with her, Jerry. You are both my friends, and I hate seeing you two in divorce court." "Did she tell you why I walked out, Jeff? Why I want a divorce?" I asked. "She said you two had an argument about her going out. She got drunk and cheated on you," he replied. Pro time, Jeff. She went out after I told her I had a bad feeling about it. She screwed 3 men and then asked me if I wanted to swap with her friends. There's your case, Jeff. I'm going to see Sally Black. We both know she's the best in the business. I'll have her call you as soon as we get a plan together. Thanks for nothing, Jeff. I turned around and walked out. Sally was the best divorce lawyer in the state. She was as hard-nosed as they come. I knew a few men who went against her, and they were all taken to the cleaners. I called Sally, and she gave me an appointment for the next day. She told me not to talk to Beth until we had our meeting. I asked her about the kids, and she told me to have my parents call them and let them know we would talk in the next couple of days. My parents did call the kids and talk to Amy, our oldest. They told Amy that I would call them and talk to them in the next few days. They'd mentioned that if any of the kids had an emergency, they should call them. I would be staying at their house. About 2 hours later, Beth called. She told my dad she needed to talk to me. I shook my head no, and my dad said that my lawyer advised me not to talk to her that day. He told her I would call after meeting with my lawyer. I heard my dad say to Beth, "Beth, I don't know what happened between you two, but you must have hurt Jerry terribly. I've never seen him like this." He talked a little more and then hung up the phone. He looked over at me and said, "Beth told me to tell you she loves you and not to do this to your family." I was pissed. I knew she was going to throw it in my lap and make it my fault. My mom was out of the room, so I told my dad the truth. I told him not to tell Mom because it would crush her. She loved Beth. He had tears in his eyes when he left the room. My dad was a pretty sentimental guy. I had to go to work the next day. I wasn't allowed to accept personal calls in the plant except for emergencies. I told my manager about applying for a divorce and to make sure no calls from Beth were forwarded as emergencies. I was glad to be working. It kept my mind focused on something other than Beth. I met with Sally after work. She was a beautiful lady, but pretty much all business. "Jerry, what do you want to happen here?" she asked. "Wow, I guess I'm not really sure. You see, I love Beth. I really do and probably always will. I don't want to destroy her or anything like that. I just can't live with the lifestyle she wants. I'm not into sharing her, and I'm not interested in having sex with just anybody. I am somewhat worried about the kids. I know they're older, but I don't want her bringing every Tom, Dick, and Harry to the house, although I don't think she would do such a thing. I didn't think she would cheat on me either," I said. Sally nodded and spoke. "Jerry, people go through this every day. We can do whatever you want. I take it you don't want the affair situation publicly known for the sake of the kids." She continued to explain a potential settlement, including financials and custody plans. Sally continued, "You need to support them, and we can pretty much dictate the amount you can give or take, whatever you want. You're in the driver's seat here. We might have to use the affair as a weapon to get things settled, but we'll go for irreconcilable differences in the end. Is that all right with you? You're my lawyer. I'll follow your advice," I replied. "You make a pretty hefty salary now. Since she is working, we can probably get away with $500 a week in child support, and as the kids turn 18, knock off about $50 a week. No spousal support. When all the kids are over 18, the money stops. You'll also be responsible for their medical expenses. As far as higher education, it's up to you if you want to supply any. You don't have to legally. Your oldest is 17, and your youngest is 12, so you will have to pay some support for the next 6 years. Do you want to go with this, or do you want something else?" "What about our savings and my retirement package?" I asked. "All the savings will be divided equally, as well as any bills that are in both of your names. You have 2 vehicles, so you can each have one. Your retirement is exactly that, your retirement. We won't let her touch that. The house and furnishings are the only things left. What would you like done with them?" "Our house is worth about $200,000, and we owe about $60,000, but my kids live there. I'm not sure what to do," I said. "I have an idea to throw at you," Sally replied. "In many cases like yours, where you're not after revenge, and there are kids involved, I suggest that you let her have the house to live in until the children are all grown and out of the house, say, age 21, for example. At that time, the house will be sold and the money divided equally, or one of the two parties can buy the house at half the worth minus what's owed on it. She will be responsible for half the house payment. So much to go through. Why wasn't I enough for her? 18 years down the drain, I said. I guess we can go with that. What if either Beth or Jeff want to fight it? Then we pull out the big guns and bring up the cheating. I'm pretty sure they don't want that. If they do, then we'll ask for custody, a 50-50 split of everything. And of course, no support since she won't have the kids, Sally replied firmly. The next day, Sally called Jeff and told him that she had an offer for him and Beth, asking if they could be at her office at noon. Of course, Jeff bemoaned coming to Sally's office but agreed to it, knowing it was a no-win situation for him. Jeff and Beth showed up at the same time. I figured Jeff told her to wait for him in the parking lot. There we were at the table, Sally and me on one side, and Jeff and Beth on the other. Jeff spoke first. He knew Sally and wasn't happy about being on the opposite side. Nice to see you again, Sally. I know how you operate and like to get down to business. Before you make us an offer, Beth would like to talk privately with Jerry. No, I said. She did her talking the other night. I will talk to her only after the papers are signed. Everyone here is aware of why I'm asking for the divorce. I looked directly at Beth. If you're afraid of having your love life being exposed, please listen to my offer. I think it is most generous, Sally said. Beth hung her head but didn't speak. Jeff cleared his throat and asked, "What's the offer?" Sally laid it out in detail. Child support, no spousal support, and the house arrangement. She explained that I was being more than fair and wasn't seeking to destroy Beth or drag out the divorce. Jeff, predictably, replied, "We'll need time to review this and make a counteroffer." "Just so we're clear, Jeff," Sally responded coldly, "there will be no counteroffer. If you turn this down, which I believe would be very ill-advised, Mr. Cohen will file under adultery and ask for custody of the kids and the house." Beth broke into tears at the mention of adultery. She grabbed a pen and asked where to sign, her hands trembling. Sally stopped her. "Mrs. Cohen, please take a day or so, as Jeff has suggested, and see if everything is agreeable. Maybe we have overlooked something. Jerry is seeing to it that you and your kids are well taken care of. Please discuss it with your lawyer," Sally said, handing her a tissue box. Beth wiped her tears and looked at me. "Jerry, I do love you, no matter what you think. I was just hoping that we could put some time between us and maybe get back together, but I see that you've already made your decision." "No, Beth. You made my decision for me. You want the freedom to do as you please, and I'm giving it to you. The only thing I ask is that you keep your lovers away from my kids, or I'll take them from you. That's a promise." Beth started crying again as she hurried out of the building. Jeff said goodbye to us and told Sally he would probably see her tomorrow or the next day. Sally looked at me and said it looked like I would win this case. "There are no winners, Sally," I replied. "Only losers. I lost the only woman I ever loved, and my kids now live in a single-parent home. No, we didn't win. We just got a fair agreement." My daughter Amy drove the two youngest over to my parents' house to see me. I was happy to see them. They kept asking questions, and I tried to keep my answers simple. I explained that their mom and I weren't getting along and didn't see eye to eye on some major issues, so we would be getting divorced. I reassured them that their mom and I would always be in their lives. We just wouldn't be together anymore. "Daryl, I'll be at your games. I wouldn't miss them. And Carla, when volleyball season gets here, I'll be in the stands rooting for you. I will always be part of your lives," I said, hugging and kissing them as they told me how much they loved me. I gave them my cell phone number and, of course, let them know they could always call me at Grandma's house. Brad showed up a little later. "Dad, I have a question for you." Did you cheat on Mom? No, Brad. I would never cheat on your mother. Why would you ask me that? I replied. Well, Jim, my buddy at school, and Travis, our neighbor, said their parents are divorced, and in both cases, their dad was caught cheating on their mom. I was hoping you didn't do something like that. God, I love you, Dad, and I'm going to miss you, Brad said. Brad, you won't be missing me. I'm not leaving the country. I'll always be here for all you kids. It will just take some time to get used to our situation. I reassured him. The divorce was finalized, and I kept my promise to the kids. I went to most of their school functions. I saw Beth at many of them. She was a good mom. If she was having any affairs, she was keeping it very private. I might mention here that Beth and I were always on speaking terms. We got together for the kids' birthdays and other special occasions. The only agreement we had was that she wouldn't mention her dating life to me. We talked about the kids, holidays, my parents. No topic was off limits except her love life. A couple of times, she started to say something about a male friend or something along those lines, and I would get up and leave. The agreement that Sally and I wrote up was signed by all of us. I wasn't there when Beth came in to sign it. Sally told me Beth took it pretty hard. We had a few arguments with Jeff about which credit cards would be paid by whom. I guess that was his way of saving face. I told Sally that if push came to shove, I would pay them. We canceled all our credit cards and had new ones issued in separate names. I talked with the kids regularly. They told me their mom accepted the fact that we were divorced and seemed a little happier. I asked them if she dated, and they told me no. She did go out with girlfriends about once a month. I think I cringed when I heard that. I never did have that heart-to-heart with Beth. She wanted the freedom to explore, and that wasn't my thought in life. You don't marry someone and decide to find new attractions. It was the way I was brought up. As I mentioned, my parents were married over 40 years. Maybe we did get married too early, and she didn't get a chance for whatever it is she was seeking. I never explored the sexual realm either. I was happy with Beth. Going back a couple of years, I should mention that I did start dating again. I went out with a few women from work. At my age, most women I met and dated were divorced. I made it a point never to date a married woman, even if she was separated. I guess it's something I felt inside. I did have sex with a few of these ladies. It just wasn't the same for me. I mean, it was good, and I treated them all with respect, but I always thought about Beth. It's funny how you can't just shake it off and go on with your life. I tried. Believe me, I really tried. All the women I dated just didn't do it for me. My best days were the family events when I could see Beth. One night last year, I went out with the guys from work. They said they knew a noisy lounge where the women hung out. Of course, you know who I saw there. It must have been ladies' night out. I looked up, and there she sat. It was funny, though, because there weren't any men around them yet. I didn't know any of the women she was with. The only one I ever met from her work was Barb, and she wasn't there. I walked up to Beth from the side, so she didn't see me coming. "Would you like to dance?" I asked. "Jerry, what are you doing here?" she asked. "Just out with the guys. Are you waiting for someone, or do you want to dance?" I replied. No, I'm not waiting for anyone. And yes, I'd love to dance with you. "Let me introduce you to my friends," she said. She rattled off a half-dozen names and then said, "These women all belong to our card club. About once every 6 months, we go out instead of playing cards, and it just happens to be tonight. Now, how about that dance?" We went up to the dance floor, and I held her in my arms, just like old times. "Isn't it?" I said. She looked up and smiled as I pulled her tighter. We had 2 slow numbers in a row, and then the band started a fast one. I never could dance to those types of songs, I said as I walked her back to her table. She seemed sad that I took her to the table. "Ladies, it was nice meeting you. I'd better get back to my friends," I said. As I walked away, it just didn't seem right. I didn't want to see if she was approached by another man. I told my friends that I had to leave and would see them later. As I walked out the door, I turned and saw Beth staring at me. The next day, I got a call from her. She said it was nice to see me out and about and enjoyed being with me. She asked if I would help plan Amy's wedding reception. My oldest daughter was going to get married. It seemed like just yesterday I held her in my arms, and now here she was, ready to start her life with her boyfriend. It was funny that Beth called the day after I had seen her, even though I already knew about Amy's wedding being a year away. I told her, "It seems a bit early to make plans since the wedding is so far off." She replied, "Reservations and such have to be made way in advance. I thought you could help me figure it out. I suggest you give Amy a call and make the plans with her. After all, it's her wedding. Once you two have your ideas on paper, I'll look at the financial end," I said. She agreed and said, "That's fine. I'll call Amy and get things started." I wanted Beth to know that one dance didn't put us back together. I called her about a month later to ask how the plans were coming along. Carla answered the phone and said Beth had gone out with friends. I was aggravated but had no right to be. We'd been divorced for over 2.5 years. I asked Carla, "Does your mom go out regularly?" She replied, "About once a month." That answer sat with me for the rest of the night. On a whim, I called my buddy Pete and asked him if he wanted to go to the lounge. Pete was divorced too and enjoyed the social scene. We walked in, and the place was packed. Sure enough, I saw Beth sitting with a group of people, both men and women. I decided, to hell with her. I was going to find someone else to dance with. I spotted a young woman, probably around 30, dressed in a sexy miniskirt. She wasn't wearing a bra, and Pete said, "Damn, now that's nice. Check out those gals sitting by themselves." The women were seated at a table close to Beth's, and I decided to walk in that direction. Beth spotted me as I approached. Her mouth opened in surprise, but I walked right past her table to the one with the younger women. "Care to dance?" I asked one of them. "Sure, I like older men, especially good-looking ones," she replied, loud enough for Beth to hear. We got up, and I held her close, keeping her body pressed tight against mine. "I'm Jerry, and you are a very lovely woman," I said, dancing almost directly in front of Beth's table. "I'm Rachel, and it's nice to meet you, Jerry," she said with a flirty smile. I kept her close and avoided looking at Beth. The men at Beth's table were blatantly staring at Rachel's legs. At one point, I adjusted her skirt to show a little more, giving them something to look at. After a fast song came on Rachel and I stayed on the floor and danced. I knew this would get to Beth since I never danced fast songs with her. When another slow song started, I grabbed Rachel and held her tight again. Sliding my hands down once, I gave her a gentle squeeze. She smiled but didn't pull away. At the end of the song, I walked her back to the table and told her, "Maybe we can dance again later." "I'd like that," Rachel replied. Pete had returned to our table after dancing with another woman. He looked up suddenly and said, "Here comes a nice-looking broad." Pete didn't know Beth, but that's who was walking toward us. "Will you dance with me?" she asked. I looked over at Pete and said, "Pete, meet Beth, my ex-wife." His jaw dropped, remembering he had just called her a broad. Standing up, I said, "It would be a pleasure," and took Beth to the dance floor. "What was that all about?" Beth asked as we started dancing. "She was all over you. God, she would have screwed you on the dance floor if you had asked her. Isn't that why we're divorced? You wanted me to screw other women so you could have other men," I shot back. "Jerry, please," she said. "You and I never did talk about it. I was wrong. Look, Beth, you came home with other men's juices running out of you like a faucet, and all you can say is, 'I was wrong.' Maybe I should screw that little filly and then say I was wrong too. Besides, we're not married now. When you went on your sex spree, you were my wife. My wife, damn it," I said, trying to keep my voice low. At that moment, some guy approached us on the dance floor. "Beth, what are you doing? You're supposed to be my date, and you're dancing with this guy." I looked at the weasel and said, "Screw off, buddy. You're not getting anything off Beth tonight." Beth looked mortified. "Who the hell are you? Her husband or something?" the guy asked. "Yeah, I'm her husband. And you're going to be in the hospital if you don't get the hell away from us," I said. Beth started to speak, but I interrupted her. "Do you want to sit with me or go back to your boyfriend here?" Beth was fuming. She pulled away from me and went back to her table. I grabbed the creep by the arm and said, "If you try anything with her tonight, I'll hunt you down and kill you." Then I let go of him and watched him retreat. The young women Pete and I had danced with earlier came back to our table and asked if we were ready to leave. One of them said, "I'm hot and horny." Pete grinned, and we left with them. We went to Pete's apartment and had a wild night. The sex was great, but the next morning I felt empty. Something was missing. Love, that's what was missing. It wasn't the same without it. When I turned my phone on, there were 10 missed messages from Beth. In one of them, she said, "You ruined my evening." That at least made me feel good. It was about 9 o'clock in the morning when I called her. "Have you calmed down any?" I asked. She began ranting again, but stopped abruptly. "How does it feel, Beth, to know the one you love is screwing someone else? It's the life you chose. You screw who you want, and I'll screw who I want. To hell with love." I hung up as I heard her start to cry. For the next couple of weeks, I didn't hear from her. Then one day, she called and asked, "Jerry, can we talk? About everything. Beth, it's over now. Go on with your life, and screw whoever you want." "I don't care anymore," I said coldly. "Jerry, I haven't had sex with a man in 2.5 years, she replied. "The last time was a month after you left me. It wasn't all that good, and there was no love. I realized it was just men using me. I'm not like that, Jerry. I was wrong, really wrong, and there's no way I can prove it to you. I wanted to try and explain it to you, but that type of life isn't for me. Honestly. 2.5 years. What about that idiot a couple of weeks ago who said he was your date? He had every intention of betting you. Did you or didn't you?" I asked, my tone sharp. "He wasn't my date. He was friends with one of the guys at our table. The other men were with their wives. Since I was the only single woman there, he assumed I would be with him. I had no intention of doing anything other than maybe dancing with him. Besides, he told me you threatened to kill him if he laid a hand on me." "Did you really say that, Jerry?" she asked, almost amused. "I sure did. Do I have to follow up on my threat?" I asked. "Hell no. He wouldn't even dance with me after that. The only reason I went back to the table was because you embarrassed me so badly. Then you sent that girl over to tell me you were going to have sex with her. Did you, Jerry? Did you have sex with her?" Beth asked. "Beth, we're not married. I'm free to do what I want," I replied flatly. Then I changed the subject. "By the way, whatever happened to your friend Bart? I don't see her with you anymore. They don't belong to the club anymore. She and her husband are divorced. The reason they tried swapping was because they thought it would add some excitement to their marriage. Her husband ended up divorcing her and leaving with the other man's wife. 2 more marriages went down in flames," she explained. I thought it was ironic that she brought up the club. "So how are the wedding plans for Amy coming along? You haven't told me much about them." "And now it's only a few months away," I said. "I know you know all the plans. Amy has talked to you a dozen times. I guess I felt like you didn't want to be over here alone with me, so that's why we made the plans and just let you verify them," she replied. "I'm not afraid to be alone with you, Beth," I said. "Oh yeah? I don't believe you. If you're not afraid of me, then take me out on a date," she laughed. "I don't think that would be a good idea, Beth. It may give the wrong impression. People might think we were getting back together," I replied. I knew it. You're afraid. You still love me, just like I love you, but you won't admit it, she said confidently. Beth, I do love you, but the hurt of what you did to me is still there. I see it every time I look at you. When you cheated on me, you took a big part of my heart away. I don't think it's mended yet. I don't know if it ever will, I confessed. God, I'm so sorry, and there is nothing I can do. Nothing, Jerry. I'm the one who ruined our marriage. I'm the one who lost the only man I ever loved. I'm also living daily with the guilt. I've thought time and time again about taking my own life, but it's the kids who would have to live with that. I've done enough damage to them. I was hoping that one day, maybe, just maybe, we might get back together, she said. I didn't know what to think anymore. I had never talked to her like this, and now I was hearing all of this. My mind was in turmoil. I wanted her, I loved her, and I hated what she had done to me, and to our marriage. What if she followed through on her thoughts about ending her life? Was she laying the guilt trip on me? I had to know more before I believed her. I couldn't live with it if she took her own life. I thought I knew her well enough to tell if she was lying to me, but now I wasn't so sure. I needed answers. Beth, I'm getting hungry. Care to join me at Red Lobster for lunch? We could discuss what to give Amy as a wedding present, I suggested. All I heard for the next 30 seconds was crying. Then a tiny voice said, I'd love to. Now, Beth, you have to understand that this isn't for sex. It's lunch and a little talk about Amy's wedding, I clarified. I understand, she said, and I could almost hear her smiling. I stopped by to pick her up. She was standing on the porch waiting for me. God, she was beautiful, dressed in a nice dress that showed ample legs. I pulled up, and she almost ran to the car. She got in and just smiled. We talked about general things, avoiding the heavy stuff. She told me she had bought a dress for the wedding, and mentioned that I'd better get measured for a tux. Without thinking, I asked her if she would go with me to see how I looked in one. I hadn't worn one since our wedding almost 22 years ago. She looked surprised. So was I. It just slipped out. Yes, I'd love to come with you. Just let me know when, she said. I could hardly take it back, so I told her the following Saturday would be fine. I knew I had to watch myself. I could get into trouble here. We were seated at the table and both ordered iced tea. We always ordered the same drinks. We had so much in common. Beth, I need to ask you something, and I really need to know the truth. I promise that after you answer, we will never discuss the topic again, I said. She looked at me, a bit wary. Go ahead, she said. Did you mean it when you talked about taking your own life? I asked. She looked down, a tear forming in her eye. Don't worry, I won't cry. I've done enough of that in the last 3 years, she began. In answer to your question, yes, I did. I told you I went out once after you left me. I know this is going to sound really stupid, but I did it for revenge against you. Revenge against me? I don't understand, I said, confused. I was all mixed up, confused, and felt abandoned by you. I know it wasn't your fault at all, but at the time, I wasn't thinking rationally. So I went out again to get even with you. I wasn't enjoying it at all, and that's when I got up to leave. He called me his witch. I slapped him and kicked him, then came home crying. The kids were already in bed, and I just felt like my life was over. I went in and got a whole bottle of sleeping pills and was about to take them when Carla came into my room and asked if she could sleep with me. She told me she needed me. I started crying with my little girl asleep in my arms. That's when I prayed to Almighty God for help. A calmness came over me, and I decided my kids needed me. And just maybe, you would see the change in my life and want me back. She brought tears to my eyes. Luckily, our meals came, and we changed the subject and started eating. Afterward, I asked her if she wanted to go to a movie. We found a good comedy, so we could both laugh. When I took her back home, she asked me if I wanted to come in. I told her, not now. I have a lot of thinking to do. Before she got out of the car, She leaned over and kissed me. I didn't stop her. She felt so good, like she belonged there. "I love you, Jerry. Just remember that," she said as she got out of the car and went into the house. Something just didn't sit right with me. She had told me twice now that she did the swap thing only one more time, a month after I left her. I wanted to believe her, but the puzzle pieces didn't fit. For one thing, if you go to a swap club, you need a partner. Who was hers? It couldn't have been Joe because he was the one she swapped to be with. Where was her man when she was fighting Joe off? Then there was the possible suicide she mentioned. She talked about taking her own life, but only ever mentioned the sleeping pills. I wanted to believe her, but I needed answers. My biggest problem was where she went every month and with whom. For 2.5 years, the kids never mentioned meeting anyone new. Maybe she was being honest with me, and I was just being paranoid. All our free time was spent preparing for Amy's wedding. I did have lunch with Beth, Amy, my son Brad, and Amy's fiancé, Ben. We were headed over to be fitted for our tuxes. I swear I looked like a penguin. But Amy and Beth both said I looked handsome. Time flew by so fast, and before I knew it, it was time for the wedding rehearsal. I went to the church and did everything I was supposed to. No big deal. As Amy and I walked down the aisle during the practice, I did some silly things like hopping and skipping. Nothing bad, just having fun. I remember the pastor saying, "It'll be different tomorrow. You might be nervous, so try to remember your parts." I thought, yeah, walk down the aisle, and later say, "Her mom and I." Who couldn't do that? Afterward, we all went to a restaurant for dinner. I made sure to go since it was something I didn't have to pay for. Before I left to go home, Beth came up to me. I hadn't said much to her that evening. "Jerry, I'll see you tomorrow," she said. There was something about the way she said it. I leaned over and kissed her. I don't know why. I just did. Maybe it was the joyousness of the occasion. I can't really say. She smiled at me, and I left. The next day, I got to the church early, just like I was told. The bridesmaids and ushers were all there. People started arriving, and I began feeling jittery. Beth was escorted to the front row. She looked so beautiful. I'd never seen her more radiant. As she smiled at me, she said, "How's my penguin today?" and laughed lightly. "He's scared shitless. His daughter is getting married, and his wife never looked more beautiful," I replied. I realized what I said after it left my mouth. It was true. I'd never seen her more beautiful. "It's okay, honey. Everything will work out fine. You'll do fine. Just don't walk on Amy's dress," she whispered with a smile. I headed to the back of the church to wait for Amy. When I saw her walking toward me, I started crying. She looked like a younger version of Beth. "It's okay, Daddy. We can do this. Mom told me to tell you she loves you and not to step on my dress," Amy said. It made me chuckle. She was so much like her mother. I got a little pang, hoping Amy wouldn't be exactly like her mother. My little girl was getting married. The music started, and we began walking down the aisle. I kept telling myself not to step on Amy's dress. My eyes filled with tears as I walked her toward the altar. This was what life was all about: love, family, and friends. We made it to the front of the church, and half the people there had tears of joy in their eyes. Thank God I wasn't the only one. "Who gives this woman to be married?" the pastor asked. That was my line. Her mother and I. But what did I say? Me and Beth. I turned to sit next to Beth, and she was both smiling and crying. I whispered to her, "I screwed up. One stupid line, and I screwed it up. Everything is fine, honey." "You did great," she whispered back. Throughout the whole service, I held Beth's hand, probably to the point of hurting her. She didn't say a word. She just sat there, smiling and crying. I was glad when the ceremony was over, but then we had to stand around for pictures and go through all the other wedding traditions. Finally, it was time for the reception. I needed a drink and got one right away. Everyone seemed to be having a great time. Amy and Ben made a wonderful couple. Guests kept coming up to me and saying how nice it was to see me and Beth together. Every time I heard it, Beth just smiled, never saying a word. When the dancing began, they had the traditional parent of the bride dance. I guided Beth onto the floor, and we started dancing. People began clapping for us. I looked around and saw all our kids smiling. My mom and dad gave me a thumbs up from across the room. It seemed like everyone was sure about us, except me. After the wedding, Beth asked if I would drive her home. Of course I said yes. When we got to her house, she asked, "Are you coming in?" I replied, "The kids will be home shortly, and I don't want them to get the wrong idea." They already have the wrong idea. They went home with your mom and dad, and will be sleeping in your bed. The only place for you to sleep tonight is in my bed, or Brad's, Beth teased. "Are you going to open my door for me?" She smiled. I decided, what the hell? She wanted me, and for the moment, I wanted her too. I got out, walked her to the door, and opened it. She invited me in. "Jerry, you don't need to marry me tonight. Maybe the time will come, and maybe it won't. I do want you to make love to me tonight, just like you used to," she said softly. I refused the offer to spend the night with her, saying it wasn't the right time. Instead, I spent a few hours with her over coffee, chatting about her life since the divorce. She told me she hadn't been with anyone since a month after we split. "I'm not ready to be back with you, Beth." I told her, "I need more time. Jerry, I'm not going to push you, and I'm not going to rush you. But I'll always be here for you, as long as it takes," she said. I smiled at her and left the house. I didn't even kiss her goodbye. I wanted her to know that I wasn't ready yet. But now I had a new problem to think about. Beth claimed she'd been without a lover for almost 3 years. My heart refused to believe it. Everything seemed to be fitting together too neatly, too easily. For over 2 years, Beth never said anything about wanting to get back together. Yet, over the past year, she was throwing herself at me. I needed to know more. When I got back to my parents' house, everyone had already left. My dad asked me if everything was okay because I seemed out of sorts. I explained to him that something didn't feel right, and I needed to figure it out. Even though it was Sunday, I called Sally, my lawyer. I explained the situation, and she found it odd too. She told me to keep quiet for a couple of days. She had a private investigator who could look into it. On Monday, Beth called and asked if I would come over for dinner. I told her I was busy and would take a rain check. I didn't tell her that I was getting restless, trying to make sense of everything. Something wasn't adding up. By Thursday, Sally called me at work and asked me to come to her office as soon as possible. "It's extremely important," she said. I took the rest of the day off and drove to Sally's office. When I got there, she told me things I didn't want to hear. I had been right about Beth. She still belonged to a SWAT club, and her partner was none other than Jeff, her lawyer. "After you walked out, Jeff decided to take your place," Sally said. "Beth never gave up her lifestyle. She just hid it from you. Why would she bother coming after me this past year if she still wanted to live like that?" I asked. "It's all about money, Jerry. In the last 3 years, she's borrowed against the home loan to the tune of $100,000. Instead of owing $60,000, the house is now $160,000 in debt," Sally explained. "How did she get it? Didn't she need my signature to borrow against the house?" I asked. "No. When you settled on the credit cards, one was a cash equity loan. You could borrow continuously on it up to a specified sum. Yours is almost maxed out. Jeff slipped that one past us. There was no way of knowing once you agreed to pay the credit loans. I'm sorry, Jerry. I should have caught that, but it wasn't part of the divorce terms to track her afterward," Sally said. It was a lot to take in. "What do we do now?" I asked. "The only debt you incurred is the house," Sally explained. "We'll put a lion on it for $40,000. If she ever tries to sell it, You'll get that portion of the equity. The rest is a loss. As far as the kids go, 2 are already out of the house. The other 2 are old enough to decide if they want to live with your ex-wife, with you, or with your parents. We'll leave that up to them. Jerry, since you told me you're leaving the state, you'll probably be out of the picture in terms of daily custody. I'm sure they'll want to finish their schooling year, Sally added. Thanks for everything, Sally. I guess it's all up to me now. Please call and put the freeze on the equity loan. If the kids choose to live with my parents, I'll need you to arrange for the child support payments to go to them, I said. That evening, I went home and talked to my parents. I told them I could never go back to Beth, even though my dad already knew. I explained everything again, as though he didn't know. Beth cheated on me, and I had hoped she had given up that lifestyle, but she hasn't. If she had been honest with me, we might have been able to work things out. I knew my parents were deeply hurt, but they needed to know the truth. The next day, I stopped by Beth's house while she was at work. I sat down with the kids and told them the truth, or at least a simplified version of it. Your mom cheated on me, I said. I gave her time to change, but she never did. I thought we had a chance at Amy's wedding, but I've learned that she was still lying to me. I could never live with her or trust her again. It's just not possible. The hardest part was telling them that I was leaving the state. You can choose to come with me, stay with your mom, or live with your grandparents. It's up to you, I told them. Both Carla and Daryl decided to stay with their mom. Even though she might have boyfriends, she's never brought them to the house. Carla said, I've never seen any strange men here, just family and Jeff. We've known him for years. I didn't have the heart to tell them that Jeff was one of her lovers. The kids cried, saying they would miss me. I explained that I would only be 5 hours away and that they were always welcome to visit. Where are you going, Dad? Brad asked. Next week. Once I get settled in, I'll give you my address and phone number. I love all of you and will help you any way I can, I replied. I called Beth at work, something I had never done before. Beth, I'll meet you at the tavern. We need to talk away from the kids, I said. She told me she got off work in an hour and would meet me there. I knew she must have thought her plan had worked and that we'd be getting back together. When she arrived, I began, Beth, I've been doing a lot of thinking. Because of Amy's wedding and us starting to have conversations again, everyone thinks we're getting back together. It's all moving too fast for me. Do you know that no one knows why we got divorced in the first place? She looked at me, concerned but stayed silent. I continued, I look back at your life over the last 3 years, and there's something missing. The hurt and pain I felt when I discovered your cheating. There wasn't any for you. Sure, your financial situation hurt a little, but that was about it. Her face paled as I went on. Beth, having coffee with you the other night was one of the best nights I've had in years. Yet, I can't get past the fact that you told me you hadn't been with anyone for over 2 years. Why did you lie to me? I didn't. She insisted. I told you I went out once after you left and hated it. Really? Then what about your monthly girls' nights out? The women you were with from work and your card club were swap club members. So you've been getting your sex all along, haven't you? I challenged her. She started crying again. Jerry, please let me explain. Go ahead. Explain it. Go home and tell your kids why I left in the first place. Tell them you're a kitty and I'm not good enough to scratch, I said, my voice rising. God, Jerry, surely you didn't tell them about me, did you? She pleaded. It's always about you, isn't it, Beth? Never about the kids or me. I told them you cheated on me, I replied. Jerry, I'm so sorry. You left me. What could I do? I'm a woman and I need to be loved, she said, breaking down. You don't want love, Beth. What I did the other night was love. What you want is endless pleasure with unlimited partners. Did you think I'd never find out? How stupid do you think I am? I asked. She was silent, her tears flowing freely. I added, by the way, Jeff was behind all of this, wasn't he? You've been screwing him since I walked out." Her face dropped, and she whispered, "Oh my God, what have I done? What have you done? You've ruined a lot of lives, including your own. You gave up a man who truly loved you. You've hurt your kids deeply. You've lied, cheated, and now you're trying to steal from me. The love I had for you is buried so deep it's unrecognizable. All I see now is a conniving woman who will have sex with anything that walks. Think about this in a couple of years. Your looks will fade, your kids will be gone, and so will the money. You'll still have your old sex friends, and maybe Jeff, though I doubt he'll stick around once the money dries up." Beth sobbed uncontrollably. "Jerry, I really do love you. Please, stay with me. I'll go to therapy or do whatever you want. I forgot to tell you, Beth. I'm moving out of state next week. Have a nice life," I said, standing to leave. "Jerry, please don't go," she shouted. I turned back one last time. "Goodbye, Beth." With that, I left, finally ready to start a new chapter of my life. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.